Hi fellow CNC nuts and welcome. I trust you all had a Merry Christmas and I want to wish you all the best for the new year. Today's project is I'm going to make this. It's a cube-shaped box with a hinged lid, some laser engraving on the bottom, and I made it from this scrap piece of Remu wall lining that I've had laying about my workshop for a few years. Unusually, this particular project was not cut on the CNC machine. The real secret to using a CNC machine is knowing when not to use it, and this project is a perfect example of that. So why didn't I use the CNC machine to cut this out? Well, primarily there are two reasons. The first is I don't have a lot of luck cutting out Remu on the CNC. I find it gives me quite a bit of chip out. Could just be the cutters I use, but I think it's also the nature of the wood. But secondly, I could very quickly cut out 4 or 5 of these boxes and have them glued together in the amount of time it would take me to get the damn thing drawn and brought out to the CNC machine. The beauty of the method I'm about to show you is you don't need to measure anything. You can make this box and get it all cut out, get it perfectly cubed, as I've done here, all without the aid of a ruler. If you want to make it a specific size, I'll tell you later on how you can do that. But I'll show you now how I made this particular box, and then we'll go from there. I've run my material here through the thicknesser, and it's somewhere around about 6 to 7 millimeters thick. I think it's about 6.5 millimeters. The actual thickness is not really critical. What I need to do now though is I need to clean up the edges. So I'm just going to quickly run this here through the table saw and just give it a wee trim. I'm now just going to do the edge on the jointer. And now back to the table saw where I'm going to put on my sled. What I will say is if you are doing anything on a table saw, a sled is one of the better things you can add to it. I'm now going to take my piece of wood and I'm going to square up one edge. But before I do that, because my sled's been used a bit and there's a bit of cutting going on here in the past, I don't want any chip out on this, so I'm going to simply put a piece of MDF on here, which is going to give me a new cut there to stop it chipping out. I'll just set the blade height so it's just through the wood, like so, and we'll make our first cut. Now that we've squared up our edge, I'm going to bring this saw forward. I'm going to turn the power off to it to make sure it doesn't accidentally start. And I'm just going to bring my piece of wood up to it and lightly rest it so that I'm getting a tooth at the back, a tooth at the front. That way it's sitting nice and square to the blade. And I also am going to take a piece of MDF and I'm going to lightly push it against the wood. Don't force it into the blade. If you do that, what's going to happen is you're going to distort the blade and you'll end up with an incorrect spacing. So now I'm just going to take a clamp and just clamp the stop block in place, and I'm going to put it on nice and firmly, and there we have it. This means that I now have a set length for my piece to cut, and this will end up being a square piece. So now I can turn the saw back on and cut out 2 side pieces. Now that I've got my two side pieces, I now need to make, these are going to be the front and back like this. I now need pieces to go in between. Now because I want to make this a cube, clearly the pieces that go in between will need to be a little bit narrower. To be exact, narrower by the width of two of these. So I'm now just going to take my two pieces, put them against my fence, and use that as the measure for how long to make the next two pieces. One, two. Now I want to trim these here down a bit. I want to make one of these sides two thicknesses smaller. So for that, I'm going to use a scrap piece of wood, push it in like so, just to hold it down while I run it through the saw. Keep that little piece, you'll want that later. Next, I'm going to take my other piece of wood and I'm going to make it one thickness of material smaller. We don't need that piece. So that now gives me my two sides, a back and a front. We now need to move on to the bottom. Take our two pieces of wood, put them back in here, and I want to cut a new piece like so. And like so. The last piece we need is the lid, and that's going to be two widths narrower. I've laid out my pieces as they're going to go together, and I've noticed a wee problem. This piece here, while dimensionally is the correct size, I inadvertently cut it with the grain running in the wrong direction. In this particular instance, this grain runs across, and when I glue it to this piece here, I'm going to be gluing edge grain to long grain, and I don't want that. I want to go long grain to long grain. So what I've done is I've cut a new piece. It's exactly the same size, but its grain is just running in the opposite direction. Now I can glue long to long, and that'll give me better strength. It's also a great time to do any sanding. So I've sanded all these edges here. They're going to be really hard to get to once this box is assembled. I haven't worried about the other side because that's going to be at the bottom. That'll be easy to get to. Likewise, this piece doesn't show any edges, so I don't need to sand it. With the pieces now laid out, I can start gluing. Now for the glue up of this, I'm going to use the latest in technology, the rubber band. I'm just using a standard wood glue here, so I'm going to apply it down here, across here, and down here. Across here, across here, and along here, up here, and here. And that should be everything I need. Now all I have to do is assemble the pieces. Probably easier to do it this way here. Okay, so I've just basically stood this up together, and so now I'm going to grab a couple of rubber bands, and I'm just going to run it round and put them down lower on this here. And let's just hold it together at the bottom. I'll get a couple more, put them a bit higher up. And I'll just keep adding rubber bands. Now with the rubber bands in place, I want to make sure I push the bottom down as far as it'll go, and just push each of these pieces down here so they all end up making a nice flush bottom at the base. And I'll just bring one of those rubber bands, sets right to the bottom there to hold that together. I also want to make sure that my wood lines up at the top here as it should do, and at the front here should be nice and flush. Okay, you'll notice here that this here is only a little bit lower than the edges here, but this one here is twice this gap lower over here. That's on purpose, and that's the way this box should go together. One last thing is I've been around here with a damp cloth, removing any excess glue that I can find. Just roll the rubber bands out of the way if you need to get it some glue like that. Just try and clean it up. It's not so critical on the outside here because you can get a good sand on it, but on the inside here you're going to find it very difficult later to remove any excess glue, so now's the time to do it with a damp cloth. I'll put that aside, and now I can work on the top piece. Now that's going to go in here like so, and that's where this little piece here that we saved up earlier comes into it. It's going to glue in there like that to pack that out, and it's going to form our hinge. So I simply need to glue this here to here. I'm just going to take a bit of glue. Now this is probably going to be the hardest piece of the lot to put in, because once you've got the glue on there, it's going to want to slip and slide everywhere. Like so. Hold it down. I'll get my damp cloth and just remove the excess glue there. Again, that will be a difficult part to get to later. That looks good. And I'm just going to get a clamp and clamp it while it dries. So while this is drying, it's the ideal time to make a jig to do the hinge. What I've done is I cut another piece of wood the same size as the side here. And I've taken another piece of the same wood. This is the piece that I made with the grain going the wrong direction. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put it flush, and probably the easiest way of doing that is I'm going to just sit it down like this. And with a pencil, I'm going to make a line. I'm then going to turn my piece of wood 90 degrees. I'm going to make another line. The point where these two marks intersect is where I'm going to drill a hole, a 1/16 hole on the drill press. And this is going to be where the hinge pin goes. So I've now drilled my 1/16 hole and I've labelled it as the hinge. And the reason I've done that is because this one actually had a nail hole on it here and I don't want to get it mixed up. And I've labelled it as hinge on both sides. The glue's now had a chance to dry, so we'll just take off our rubber bands here. And we've got our lid here, all going well. That there should fit together nicely, which this does. This fits together really nicely. So next what I want to do is I want to drill the holes for the hinge. And that's basically a simple matter of taking my piece of wood here, lining it up, put a clamp on it, and I can now grab the battery drill and drill my hole. I'll put a 1/16 drill into here, and I'm just going to follow this hole down. One thing you do need to do though is make sure that you're drilling the hole on the piece with the large gap, not the small one. Okay, that's our first one. Now turn it over and do the same again. Again, be 100% sure you're drilling the hole on the right bit. Now with a piece of sandpaper I'm just going to tidy up that hole, like that. And I can now take my hinge piece, like so, and I'm actually going to grab a few rubber bands and just wrap it round this way here. Try and sort of hold it in place. While I drill my hole. Just want to make sure it's lined up properly. Then I take my drill. Now be careful when you're drilling through that you don't let the drill bit here rub on the outside piece, otherwise it's something you have to tidy up later. For the hinge pins, I'm using these, just plain old nails, and 1/16 is the right size hole for these nails. Should just push in there like that. Now obviously the lid won't open because this bit here needs to be rounded to allow it to open. So I'm going to take the pins out. And I now need to shape this bit here, something like that, to allow it to turn when I lift the lid. Now unfortunately I don't have a router bit that's the right radius here to round this bit over, so I'm going to do it by hand at the sanding disc here. Just taking it gently, trying it, see if it's correct, and if it's not, I'll take a little bit more off. And there we go. Hinges just right. Well, it's getting on towards midnight now, so the last thing I'm going to do before giving up for the night is I'm going to give it a coat of spray lacquer on these pieces here, and I can finish it off tomorrow. I've decided that I'd now like to laser New Zealand Remu on the bottom of my box here. What I've done is, because this is too high, I've just taken away the dummy table that sits here where I normally put the rotary axis, packed it up with a bit of MDF and put my box onto it. I've then gone and put a bit of tape on the bottom of my box and marked the centre of it. Using this, I can now set up my X and Y0 by putting a ruler onto the X like so, and then using the jog keys I can jog the LaserShoe around, and there we go. I can see now that that line, registration line I got here, is now dead centre of my X. I can now go to Mach 3 and reset X to 0. I can do the same over here on my Y. There's a Y registration mark here. Again, using the ruler. There we go. That now lines up, and that is now Y0. I can also set the height of the LaserShoe above my box here, and it should be 9mm is what I designed it as, and that's what it currently is. So now I'll just hit the origin key, and now the laser is positioned directly over that X. In actual fact, what I'd like to do is I'd like to remove that piece of tape as well. So I'll carefully remove the tape. I don't need it anymore. We'll take it back to the origin point. And now we're ready to engrave the surface of the base. I've already loaded the file into Mach 3, so I'll just hit the cycle start key. It says turn laser on. That starts the laser. I also need to start the vacuum, the fume extractor, and I'll just hit start. Laser turned off. Back it away, and there we have New Zealand Remu engraved on the base. So now that I have my engraving in place here, I now need to take care of the hinges, and at the moment I've just got a couple of nails in there. Now I'm going to use these nails, and what I've done is with a felt pen I've marked them as close as I can. I'm about 1/8 of an inch out from the edges here. You can see a little felt pin mark there. And now that I've done that, I can remove the pin. And I'm just going to cut it a little bit on the inside of that mark. And then on the sanding disc, I'm going to go and flatten this end here. My pins worked out to be approximately 5/8 of an inch in length. The final length is actually determined by how deep you drilled the hole. I'm just going to push the pins in by hand until they're flush with the surface of the wood. I'm now going to use a nail punch and just give it a small push. I don't want it to go much further. I just want it just below the edge and no more. I don't want it to sink deep into the wood. Just a little bit below flush will do me. There we go there. And now we have a hinged box. And there it is, the completed box. Really nice and simple to do. But what happens if you want this here a specific size? Well, what I'd do then is I would machine the side material, my stock material, to be the width of the largest piece. I'd then use a ruler to set the fence to cut the remaining pieces, and I'd also use the trick with the single and double thickness material there, as I showed you earlier, to cut down any bits in between to make sure that everything fits together properly. That to me is the simplest way of doing it, but it will still be quicker doing it on a table saw than it will be to do it on a CNC machine. On the other hand, you're not going to be able to laser engrave it on your table saw. If you can, send me a picture, I'd like to see it. Now of course you're not restricted to engraving just the bottom of the box, you can engrave the lid like I've done on this one here. Again, using the same procedure. In my next video, I'll take you through how I created the files to do the laser engraving on the box. If you've enjoyed this video, please remember to like it, subscribe to me on YouTube and follow me on Google+. In the meantime, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys later. Cheers!